Welcome to the Manuscript Academy podcast,
Brought to you by
a writer
and an agent
who both believe that education is key
The beauty is the people you meet along the way.
and that community makes all the difference.
Here at the Manuscript Academy, you can learn the skills, make the connections, and have access to experts, all from home.
I'm Julie Kingsley.
And I'm Jessica Sinsheimer.
Put down your pens, pause your word counts, and enjoy.
Hi, everyone. We are here with Emma Peters. She is an editor at Countryman Press at W.W. Norton. She is here to talk to you all about how you can collaborate with your future editor. Emma, welcome. Tell us about you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I'm Emma Peters. I live in Brooklyn. I've lived in Brooklyn for about 5.5 years, which is the same amount of time I've been in the publishing industry. The first 3 years of my career, I worked on English textbooks. So I come from an academic publishing background. And then I spent about 1.5 years working on art books and kids books at a tiny independent publisher. And then now I work at Countryman, where we do cookbooks, travel books, and health and wellness guides. So it's been an interesting path, and I feel like I have a lot of really different books under my belt in the 5 years that I've been around. So
Can you walk us through what it's like in the office? Like, is someone test cooking all the recipes in the cookbook?
Okay, it's so funny how often people ask if I get to eat good food or travel because I work on cookbooks and travel books. And sadly, the answer is not yet. We do get a lot of cute olive oil packages or packaged cookies sent to us, depending on the types of people we're doing cookbooks with. So we get a lot of goodies sent to the office. And some of my colleagues are very good bakers and they love to test their recipes. So they bring it into the office. But I think I'm going to suggest we get a test kitchen for Countrymen. We don't have one right now. We are talking about getting a bar cart, though, because we do a lot of cocktail books.
I love that. So you can all, for science, figure out if the recipes work.
Exactly.
So tell us what a typical day in the office is like for you.
So Countryman is a pretty small team within W.W. Norton. Norton, I think, has 600 something employees, but there's 9 of us at Countryman. And what I really like about that is we're all sitting in our cubes in the same part of the office. And a couple times a week, we all meet in the morning just to kind of talk about what everybody's working on. And if anyone has exciting news about our projects, as editors bring up projects we're hoping to acquire, and our publicity and marketing people bring up exciting hits that they've gotten on our books on the back end. My favorite part about the daily experience of working at Countryman is we're very collaborative. Publishing is so many emails. I'm sure you guys experience this as well.
Yeah.
I feel like I spend most of my day just sending emails, but I like it the best when I'm actually editing a manuscript. And I actually, yesterday and today, finished up editing a really exciting romantasy cocktail book that I've been working on. So that was the best part of my week so far. I like it when I can turn my email off, put my head down, and actually work on editing something. But obviously, the emails and the collaboration end up taking up most of our time.
Do any of them have that sparkly stuff to look magical?
Several of them do, actually, the romantasy cocktails, yes. There's a lot of sparkles. The photographer for the book, absolutely brilliant woman in Seattle. She created, it feels like, a completely separate world for each cocktail. Some of them are like in a river and some of them have like a fireplace behind them. She really immerses you in the world of these cocktails. I'm very excited about this book.
Can you talk a little bit more about the visual element that can go into nonfiction? Because finding the right photographer is often a really big deal.
It is, especially with food. Food photography is a very specific and important industry for cookbooks. Food photography can look really bad really quickly. And I have been interested to even learn too, kind of what the tips of the trade are in terms of if you want to zoom in on the food, if you want to zoom out on the food, how much you want to be overhead and how much you want to be kind of looking at it to the side like it's on a table. Turns out it's kind of a mixture of all of those things. It's really fun to be at a food photo shoot because we really just kind of stand in the back and let the photographers do their work. It's cool to see professionals styling food. They can set it up so quickly and make something look so beautiful, like it's going to be in a magazine and it just happens right in front of your eyes. And that's a very important part of the cookbook process for sure. Cookbooks are very aspirational. And that's why these images have to be so perfect, because you want to think, I could make my dining room table look like Martha Stewart if I make this meal.
Well, it's selling you on a vibe, right?
Exactly.
It's not just the food, it's the table where you will eat it. And all of that can make such a big difference. Like when you're going through IKEA and you see the little setup houses, you're like, could I live there or would I live in that one? It's a nice break for your imagination.
That's a great analogy. I wonder if there's an IKEA cookbook, actually.
That's an idea. So we have people listening that want to write a cookbook. They want to write a cocktail book. They want to do a travel book. Tell us the best way to go about that.
I think what's really hard is finding the right size audience. If you want to do a baking book, you have to narrow it down somehow. You can't do like, let's bake everything. If you do just a cupcake book, sometimes an editorial board will say, is there really a bunch of people who are going to buy this book just about cupcakes? I think honing in on something that is both topical and accessible is the hardest part about making a successful cocktail or cookbook, because you want it to be something that people aren't necessarily going to think to make on their own, but you also want it to be something that people look at and they say, oh, I could make this. It's not too hard for me. So I think there's a lot of balance that goes into all of it. My first advice would just be finding that topic that you think can really sell and that there's a clear audience for, whether it's a big book talk community or something with more longevity, to know what your audience is going to be. Because on the editorial side, that's one of our first questions is who's going to buy this cookbook? What demographic is this for? If that answer is big enough, we can run with it. Honestly, thinking about the art program is another helpful step when you're in the early stages of a project, is to say, I know I'm probably going to have to hire a food photographer. What's my budget for that? What's the vibe that the package is going to look like? Because that's another question that the editorial team will ask is, what are your hopes for how this book is going to look on the shelf? I think people probably don't realize how much you should really kind of have ideas about stuff like that before you send in a proposal for a cookbook or a cocktail book. They are very visual things at the end of the day. And I think that's different than other parts of publishing.
How do authors get from broad idea to specific idea? What if we did the opposite? Took some cookbooks that are really specific and walked them back through the process of where did they start?
We're doing a book called The Italian Summer Kitchen right now. It's by a woman who is American, but she trained for many years with a chef in Italy. So she has some clout, and we decided to hone in on the recipes she learned while she was studying with this chef in Italy, but that still feel very accessible to the American audience. Another thing that I love about this cookbook as a side note is that it's actually fully illustrated. So that's another route you can go instead of photography. You can have some really beautiful colored sketches of the food as well. And I think it fits in with this kind of whimsical, hot Italian vibe. We could have tried to do all Italian food, American Italian and Italian. What she decided to do is really focus on what are the ingredients that you can get both in Italy and in America? What are the recipes that work really well for a single person to be making them on the stove? She narrowed it down in terms of it's from a specific region and it's for people that want to make it in their own kitchen.
It's interesting because we're always telling fiction writers to add more specificity so that we can see what the vision is.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing an American who studied in Italy teaching a particular kind of Italian cuisine and for the summer creates so much of an image versus Italian food.
Yes, that's exactly true too. And that's part of why you have to find a specific niche that you're making a cookbook about, because you're exactly right. It also has to have a cohesive vibe throughout the book.
I totally want to buy this book, by the way. My marketing brain is like, you can put this in restaurants. You can put this out for every summer for the next 10 years. There's all these things you could do to market it because you've created the niche. It's an easier route. So talk to us about marketing and the importance of that within the process of the nonfiction book proposal.
Yeah, and I'm not a marketer because my mind does not work that way very naturally. And so another thing that is awesome about our team is that our marketer is involved in helping us pick what books to acquire from the proposal process. So every time there's a cookbook proposal that I'm interested in acquiring, I have our marketer look it over and I say, what do you think about the audience? Do you think the author and the agent usually have been accurate in their portrayal of what the audience is, that what they put in their proposal. And I will say also in our editorial board meetings, which is where we as editors present projects we want to acquire to the powers that be within the larger company, it's very helpful as an editor to have your marketer on your side and say, this is going to be a really strong project. So I'm always very happy when our marketer gives me the thumbs up about a project. A good marketer, like you're saying, Julie, will have ideas right out of the gate if it's a book with a secure audience attached to it.
And so many authors are wrong about who their audience is. So someone writing a cookbook or any nonfiction project might say, this is for anybody. I think
Yes.
that helps, but it actually would help so much more to say this is a book for the person who likes Italian food, who's familiar with some of these ingredients, doesn't want to have to go to Italy to get everything, and who would like to imagine themselves in Italy in the summer while they're cooking. Versus, this is for anyone who likes spaghetti.
You're so right. It's very interesting how hearing, oh, the audience is everyone is actually a nightmare for marketing and publicity because it's never actually true. And it's so much more helpful to have an actual target.
What's another project we can work backwards on and make worse?
I guess I'll also keep talking about my romantasy cocktail book because it's my passion project right now. The book is called A Court of Cocktails. It's coming out next summer, and all the cocktails in the book are inspired by A Court of Thorns and Roses and that universe. There were a lot of discussions about whether we should make it more general, the romantasy genre, and open it up to all of these best-selling books that, should there be Fourth Wing cocktails, Throne of Glass cocktails? Ultimately, we decided to keep it A Court of Thorns and Roses because it's the OG. And I think it's emblematic enough of the romantasy genre. You can pick up the book, read Fairy, spelled Faerie, and know you're in this world of romantasy. But it really gives the book a hook and a focus, and we want people to buy this book and put it on their shelf next to their ACOTAR box set, But it was definitely a discussion of whether we should make it a whole genre, whether we should make a general fantasy cocktail book, like is romantasy too niche? I'm very happy with where we landed because I think A Court of Thorns and Roses has a huge audience to support the book. It will be emblematic enough of the genre that other romantasy readers will like it. All the Easter eggs are from A Court of Thorns and Roses.
You can't do Easter eggs if it's for everybody.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so when you're talking about this book, I already have friends in mind who will love it. When does it come out?
June 25.
Great.
So
We'll have to wait.
You've got a little while. Yeah.
When it does, I know people I'd like to send this to, and it will make me seem like a thoughtful gift giver. And that's another metric too, right? If you give this book to someone, will it seem thoughtful or just like, I needed to give you something and this had 2-day shipping?
Yes. Yeah. And, I think with cocktail books and cookbooks too, there is definitely an overlap with the gift market, which is an interesting market because then you're thinking about not people who are going to buy this book for themselves, but you want someone to see that book and say, that makes me think of someone else specific. I'm going to buy that for them. So that's another way that these kind of specific books sell really well because they do make you think of someone right away.
It's an enthusiastic purchase. It's not I'll get something from this table.
Hopefully it's oh my gosh, I never would have thought to make cocktails based on this. So cool.
Okay, so let's make it worse. What would we do if we were going to make this book worse?
I think trying to fit other fantasy genres into it just muddy the waters. If you try to have A Court of Thorns and Roses cocktail section and a Harry Potter cocktail section and a Twilight cocktail section, all of these have some level of fantasy, dark academia, but it becomes too wide of an audience.
And so taking fan fiction, and that's the platform. So we always talk platform. So fan fiction is the platform. By niching as specific as you can actually sell more. So that's what we're talking about here, right? Do you find that sometimes it's harder to create content because you have to make it a certain length, right? So it's like you're creating, like you're stretching this idea like taffy until it's encompassed all the areas of the fandom.
Right. I think another way that you could make the book worse is if you were to say, okay, we're only going to focus on one book in the Court of Thorns and Roses universe, and every single cocktail is based on a chapter from that book. It's like, okay, now you're trying too hard. Now the concept's becoming too thin. So you do have to find something that is robust enough to provide you with enough content, but also specific enough that you have that audience that's obsessed with it.
Another way to ruin it. All the recipes have to have rose in them and
Yeah.
something sharp like a thorn. That'll ruin your cocktail book really fast.
It's so true. Using real blood.
God, this book is a biohazard. Keep it in the
Yeah.
fridge. Yeah, no, I think that's so interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking, what would happen if this was a cocktail book for all books ever? In theory, this could be a big, heavy book that someone keeps on one of those stands that they usually use for magical books and fantasies. But what do you put on the cover for that book? And I feel
Yeah.
like if you don't have any idea of cover, then you're running into a territory of like, where does this go? This book is for everyone, therefore it's for nobody.
That's a really good point. And we do start thinking about our covers so much earlier, I feel like, than I ever expected before I was in the publishing industry. I feel like you think that's kind of a cherry on the cake, but it's a big part of the marketing strategy.
Can you tell us about that concept, how you pick it and the steps you go through?
Yeah, at our imprint, we have our authors fill out a questionnaire about what their thoughts are about the cover. This helps us gauge how strongly authors feel about it, because authors are definitely on a spectrum of, I have a very specific way that I want my book to be, and I totally trust my publishing company to make all the decisions about the package of this book. Everybody falls somewhere on that spectrum. So we have them fill out this questionnaire so that we get to see what their ideas and hopes are for the cover, if they have any images that they know were taken for the book that they'd love to see on the cover, et cetera. And then as editors, we kind of fill out our own version of that in conversation with our marketing people. We send those questionnaires to our art team, and the art director mocks up anywhere from like 4 to 10 covers. And we have actually one of my favorite meetings we have every other week is our Countryman art meeting, where we get to see the drafts of covers for new books. And it's kind of crazy how long conversations can go on about, should these author names appear just slightly bigger on the next iteration of the cover, or do we want to try a slightly different color scheme? And there's a lot of different variables that go into thinking about it. Like, what's the thumbnail going to look like when you're scrolling on Amazon? What is it going to look like compared to all of the comp titles? You want it to be a clear part of the genre that you're publishing it into, but you also don't want it to look like all the other book covers. Sometimes we go through 4 or 5 drafts of these book covers before we find something that both we and the author end up liking.
I wish there was a focus group for choosing covers. And I think that'd be such a fun event for everyone to go to. And they could search cocktails from the book too.
Okay, that would be really fun. I've seen on social media where there was a poll between a few different covers for a book. And I did think that that was a really fun idea, especially when it's kind of a fan type project, or a project where you already have a very specific audience who is excited about and cares about this book. And then as a buyer, you feel like you had a say in it.
If they throw in one that's absolutely awful, people will probably vote just to make sure it's not that one.
Yeah, good strategy.
So one thing we were talking about before recording is the nonfiction collaborative process starts a lot sooner than the fiction collaborative process. How soon? How much do people need? Walk us through.
It varies on a project by project basis, but I'll talk about my Romantasy cocktail book as the basis. I actually found this book self-published on Amazon, and I reached out to the author to see if she wanted to take it down from Amazon and publish it with us in a larger and better version of what she had already created. And thankfully, she wanted to work with me on it. So she had somewhere between 15 and 20 recipes in her self-published book. So we took those recipes and decided to divide the book up into chapters. So there's going to be a quart of vodka, a quart of rum, a quart of gin, etc. That's where those cocktails fit into the chapters. I think a big part of my collaboration with authors is how they end up organizing the material in their book, because sometimes they know they want to do recipes on X, Y, or Z, but they don't know exactly how to separate it into book section. So we talk a lot about organization. And then I also helped her decide what level of detail to go into with the head notes for each cocktail. This is primarily a recipe book, but you want to put each cocktail in the context of the world of A Court of Thorns and Roses. We worked closely to write a few head notes to set the vibe for each cocktail. And then the author wrote the rest of them on her own. In that case, too, she was a first-time author. It's really fun to work with first-time authors because you're kind of telling them even like, these are the elements that should be in this book and what the structure of the book would be like. There is a lot of like work from the ground up in terms of what content is actually going to be in here and how are we going to flesh it out.
I was talking with some editor friends a week or two ago, and they were talking about what they're calling build-a-books, which is you go find someone in the world doing something cool, and then you sign them and teach them how to write a book proposal and send it to editors and hope for the best. So what are some things that happen in that process, and how can someone look more attractive for a build-a-book project?
Oh, interesting. I think, again, it's helpful to think about what is the structure of this book going to be like for the reader and what information do we want them to get in what order? Because a lot of these books are teach me how to do something. It's important to decide the building blocks that get the reader from knowing nothing about this topic to being almost as an expert as the person that wrote the book.
I think this is something that's so interesting that's happening in this conversation. I think it's really cool for the listeners. I think fiction writers toil and have good ideas, but toil and toil. And it's so hard to get through the noise of how difficult it can be for fiction. But nonfiction, what I'm hearing from you guys is that you can put something cool out in the world, like as a side hustle, but not have all the skills that you need. And then you all are going out there, like build a book, and you're just finding these little sparks of energy. Yeah. In a reverse manner. On the fiction side, if you self-publish, you can convert it, but not as easily unless the numbers are huge, right? But it sounds like there's something interesting going on here.
Well, it's influenced differently in nonfiction, right? So say for fiction, the numbers would be your sales numbers. For nonfiction, it's your whole platform. So
yes, that's so true.
Yeah, even if the book doesn't sell that many copies, self-published, if it's a really huge, cool platform and it looks like the author, frankly, just didn't do a very good job becoming their own publishing company, which, like, why would they? It's so many things to learn so fast. We can look at it and be like, okay, well, they did no marketing whatsoever. So of course the sales are low. But if we did it,
yeah, I think that's definitely true. What you're saying, Julie, I think what's interesting about some nonfiction is not all of these authors are writers by trade, which gives the editor a lot of freedom and responsibility to actually help the words get on the page, which is what I love about working as an editor. That's my actual bread and butter, is the working with the words. And I really like working with people who are open to edits. And I find that nonfiction authors, particularly in like the food or cocktail or travel worlds, where they're not coming from a literary place, they're coming from like a knowledge place, and they love the suggestions of how to word this differently and how to make this easier for the reader. I think that's part of it too.
They're not like, this is my baby, I've been hanging with this. They're just like, oh, I have an idea. And so being an editor that you get to mold within your vision, but it's a collaborative process. Can you tell us a story that was like your most fun doing it?
I will say at my previous job working on children's books, I loved editing. We had this lovely author from Australia who wrote in just like a classic children's book rhyme scheme. And it was a delightful story. It wasn't iambic pentameter, but with a meter and a rhyme scheme. But there were a bunch of Australian references in it, and we were going to try to sell the book in America. So my colleague and I sat down and like rewrote many of the stanzas to have the same whimsical feel, but without the references that nobody would get. And I was a little nervous to send it to the author because I was like, well, I kind of changed like a lot of your words here. But he was like, oh, for the American edition, like this is perfect. He was very happy with it. And obviously it was all inspiration taken from his rhyme scheme and like really getting into his voice and trying to implement that back into the new words. It felt like a joint editorial and creative writing venture.
That's nice. I bet that was fun.
The kids' books were fun.
Everyone has a slightly different process. What is your process for you see someone doing something cool out in the world? How do you make sure it can actually turn into a book and they're up for writing it with you?
Well, I think there is a level of, and I don't even know if I like that this is true, but in this year of our Lord 2024, it is really hard to sign someone up to a nonfiction project if they don't have a substantial social media following. That's one of the first things we look for. Can you reach your own people in this digital age? Is there proof that people are engaging with your content right now? So that's one of the biggest things. We meet with authors before we decide if we're going to work with them or not. And it really helps when they are clearly a go-getter, very like personable. You can tell that they want to sell their message as much as you do. People have that spark. Most creative people doing interesting things have that spark. And I think that's also kind of what we look for, is just someone who you can tell is going to connect with people. Also on the publicity end, like if they did an interview, are they going to be able to sell this book? I think especially for nonfiction personalities, those things are really important. Like how sellable is the author's personality?
I imagine there's a certain amount of, okay, this person would be good on Good Morning America. This
Yes,
person
exactly.
would be good on a late show being snarky. This person would be great on radio. Their voice is awesome. I kind of look at clients like that too. It's a little different for fiction, of course, but how do you trust that this author is going to be able to get up there, share enthusiasm about their work, talk about the vision in a clear way, and make it so that folks who are completely unfamiliar with the project get it and get who they'd buy it for?
In my experience so far, it's really been kind of a gut feeling when you meet with the author. You have a conversation about the book. Did I learn something more about their project? Did I learn something about their background that makes the project make more sense? Am I more excited about this project?
I'm going to poke at this. I remember having a meeting once, and I was talking about a book, and they're like, okay, can you go on the news? Can you do a radio show? Are you comfortable talking to 300 people? Can you talk about yourself online? Like there's all these really weird nuances, right? And so I would push back and say, what can the writer do to help with that? Like a voice coach. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, but like I did a bunch of live storytelling, and the voice coach, actually, it's super helpful. Or is there some practice things that you can do before going into these meetings? If we want to be in this business, how do you come across as not an out of control golden retriever looking for a ball to a professional entity? That's just a very difficult thing, right? Do you have tips for a writer going into this?
I would say it's honestly, I feel like I have very similar advice for this that I do when I'm giving people job interview advice, which is at the end of the day, as much as you can be yourself in these meetings, it's okay if you're more shy. And if you don't want to go on Good Morning America, as long as we see your passion behind this project and your willingness to do other things behind the scenes, as much as it's lovely to have an author who has a personality that wants to go out and sell to the masses, the most important thing for me, that it feels like I have a rapport with the authors. And you only really get that sense when everyone in the meeting is being themselves. Trust your own project and trust your own instincts that made you get this far in the first place, and like be yourself. Don't oversell or undersell yourself, because ultimately it's probably all going to come out anyway, like what our personalities and what all of our strengths are. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And I think another way of talking about the mindset that works that you're talking about, another way is kind of almost taking a step back, as if you're like, we're all in this human condition. Isn't it weird? Someone comes to you, would you like to go in front of 300,000 other humans? Frankly, no. But I think that that would get you a lot farther with your team than being like, sure, that's fine. No big deal. And then everyone can tell from the answer that A, you're lying, and B, you'll do a bad job. It's so much more refreshing when someone's like, that sounds terrifying. I don't think I can do that. We don't need everyone to have that big, loud, boisterous energy. We need authenticity and a real voice.
And I was just playing around there because obviously I always try to think what the writers might be thinking about, the listeners. But I think anxiety management is one of the best things you can do for yourself. Like figure out meditation, go for a walk, go into the woods, or have your dog near you, whatever you can do to be your authentic self in these conversations. Often writers want it so much that it's not their authentic self. The conversation comes off different than if they were in a calm space. Just a tiny thing you can do, right? What are the things that might help you moving into this situation?
Well, you can free up some of your own energy by doing this by repetition. So many authors really get stuck when someone asks, "Hey, what's your book about?" So, whether
Yeah.
they're in an elevator with an agent or if it's another writer at a conference or just someone random is like, "Oh, you write books? That's cool. What are you writing about?" I really think that you could get yourself over this just by doing it over and over and over again. Sometimes you're going to fall flat on your face, and that's okay. Using people in your life as a focus group can be really easy. So if you get 10 of your friends and you're like, hey, sometime in the next week, sneak attack me with what is your book about? Just do it over and over again. Julie, you came to our member help desk. I make everyone say what their book is about over and over because you start to feel the reaction, see on people's faces what is resonating, and then go from there. And if you free up the energy of, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? Because you've practiced it enough times, then you have all the more energy to feel like yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. The other thing I would say to authors is I am also nervous in the author editor meetings. I'm trying to sell myself and Countrymen and say I would be the best editor for this project. I have a lot of the same fears of how am I going to come across and am I coming across as trustworthy enough that they want me to help handle their books? I feel like when I have these meetings, I try to start with like some very genuine, I don't want to call it small talk, but like just trying to get both of our personalities out on the table a little bit before we dive into it, because it actually can be kind of a scary conversation for everyone.
Wait, tell us some more about that. Like, what are some things that you envision might go horrifically wrong?
In a meeting. Well, sometimes authors have really hard questions, like asking me specifically about what I see the market of the book being. And I'm not very good at talking about the marketability of books because that's not really my area. So I'm like, what if I say, oh, everyone? And like we said, that's a bad answer, but sometimes it's what comes out. Or, if it's just clear that I am nervous and that why would they want me to edit this book for them? Like, I feel like that is a real fear, especially because I'm pretty young in my career. And sometimes I'm meeting with authors who are older than me. I'm only 28. I have to come across as a professional. I feel like I'm 21 most of the time. So I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome on both sides of the aisle.
I can't tell you how many people in publishing have confessed their imposter syndrome. Even folks who are getting like these really enormous deals. There's something about our industry that makes everyone feel like they have imposter syndrome. Do you have any theories?
I don't know. You're so right.
Because for empathetic people, we're all feelers.
So you think
That's
because
true.
books improve empathy and increase empathy, we work with them all day. So our empathy is really high. So then we start thinking about things that, well, we also are pretty good at knowing what we don't know, right?
Right.
So that doesn't help
Yeah.
either.
Mhm.
I mean, it's the most important thing in the world is human to human conversations that make change, right? And that's what we're doing with books. And I think bring your emotions to those meetings and being real, like it's just interesting.
I think it's really good for authors to know that we worry about that too. I'm always worried that someone will ask me a question I just don't know how to answer. And then they're going to be like, loser, why am I talking to you?
Yeah. And it's also scary to think about over-promising too. It's like, in a lot of cases, this is someone's dream that you're holding in your hands and you're saying, come and publish this with us and it's going to be a huge success. And then what if it's not? That's sad for everyone. And, I think people understand that that's a risk, but I think there is a level of like, especially when you're working with an author who's very passionate and has been working on this project for a long time, it's like, it does kind of feel like you're holding somebody else's baby.
Yeah. I'm amazed we're allowed to have the level of responsibility that we are.
I still think it's crazy when I see a sentence I wrote on the back of a book. In the bookstore, you pull it out. It's like, oh, I wrote that part of the description on the back of that book. Like, who let me do that?
That's good for authors to know. So if they're feeling that way, maybe it means that you are at a point in your process where you know what you don't know, which is a great step because it's when you don't know what you don't know that you send the pitch that's like, I have the next bestseller. Here's my phone number. Thanks, which we see often. So what are the conversations you like having most with authors?
I like it. It's awesome when you've first signed up a project and you get to dig into what I was talking about earlier. How are we going to structure this book? How are we going to flesh out your proposal? What are some exciting ideas we can generate together to make this book even better? That's a really fun part early in the process. I also love when we get design samples for the book. I'm not a designer, but I am kind of a design nerd. I love it when we get the first draft of a book design, and I get to have a meeting with the author too to go over what do they like and not like about this design. I find that's always a fun and different conversation about the project, because it's not only the content, it's how it's displayed. It's cool how all of that goes together. So it's very rewarding when it feels like I can help bring something out in them that they hadn't thought of before. So far at the Manuscript Academy, I have really loved working with fantasy authors because it's not what I do in my professional career, but it is my actual literary passion. I read it all the time, and I feel like I have this passion for it and knowledge of it. It was so fun to talk to these authors about their world building. And I really love the opportunity to read something with a completely fresh slate in my mind and then come back to the author and say, this is exactly what I got out of what you put on the page. Does that match with what you wanted someone to get out of it? And if not, here's what was missing for me with what your vision for what this was going to be was. I think that's my favorite part.
What is one tip that helps a writer get onto the page what they have in their head, so someone else reading it ends up with the same vision?
Some of my biggest advice to writers is don't think about it too hard. Just write everything you feel about this scene, and then you can always cut it later. But when you're trying to get the perfect sentence after perfect sentence, I think you lose some of the authenticity of the thoughts that you're having and the images that you're creating in your head. So I would say just smash it all down on the paper first and then clean it up.
Completely agree. You can't write and edit at the same time.
Yes. I think my friends who are writers and the people I know who are writers who hate writing, everyone's like, oh, I'm a writer, I hate writing. They're the ones who are trying the hardest just to get a perfect draft out right away. And I think a lot of times the best stuff happens when you're almost more stream of conscious, writing down every thought, and then you go back and fix it.
Yeah, because the energy is different. If you're sitting there must create perfect sentence, one syllable, too long, hate it, we're going to feel that too. And then the readers, they probably won't know why. They'll be like, I feel stressed out. I'm going to put this down.
I think that's true.
I think so much more of the author's energy comes through than we are aware, especially for agents. I used to say, you could give us a bunch of Craigslist listings and we'll be like, that one's a scam. That one's okay. That one's overpriced, because we can feel it over time. I'm not sure why that happens, but it's almost as if you could zoom into the space between the words. There's so much with how you layer your word choice and the images that go with each word that's going to happen better if you're in that creative space versus that I need to fit this puzzle piece perfectly space. Emma, thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear about your forthcoming books. How about this, Julie? If anyone happens to be listening to this episode after June 2025, what is a magic word they can send to us again after June 2025 to win a free copy of that book?
Oh, love that. Okay, let me think of one of the good cocktail names. Let's say Curse Breaker.
So the first person after June 1st, 2025 to email us at academy@manuscriptwishlist.com with Curse Breakers in the subject line will get a copy of, what is the title again?
A Court of Cocktails.
Perfect. Well, I hope someone will be listening back into the archives. We'll get this, a nice Easter egg for them. Hooray. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for walking us through all of the different parts of this, how it's kind of mirrored in an interesting way, like specificity for fiction writers, specificity for nonfiction writers. Authors are nervous, agents and editors are nervous too, and about very similar things. Little did you know. Wish we talked about it more. Emma's available for consultations. You can find her page at manuscriptacademy.com/Emma-Peters. We'll put the link in the show notes. Emma, thank you so much. This was lovely.
We are so glad that you joined us. And as always, we appreciate your feedback. Just head on over to the iTunes store and let us know what you think. It not only helps us make this podcast be the best it can be, but it also affects our ratings within the iTunes platform.
We'd love to hear from you. If you're feeling brave and want to submit your page for our First Pages podcast, you can send it to academy@manuscriptwishlist.com with First Pages podcast in the subject line. We'd also just love to hear from you.
And if you'd like to learn more about the Manuscript Academy and everything we have to offer, just jump on over to manuscriptacademy.com.